Release That Witch. Audiobook, Part 87.
Chapter 1205, A Dangerous Signal. The next morning, Lightning disclosed her plan to Maggie. After a brief discussion, they decided to conduct another search in the stone forest and then head to the Rapture as fast as they could. They would have to return to the snow ridge in the Kingdom of Everwinter and complete the topographic map of this area before meeting the Tequila Witches. The sun broke over the horizon, the mountains were wrapped in rags of mist, and the rivers crisscrossed in the frost. There were traces left by the flood last night. As the roads began its winding ascent to the crests of the mountains, they saw a vast land of whiteness lay stretched before them. The distant Rapture, completely covered by snow, resembled a giant porcelain bowl laid upside down. It was estimated that the Kingdom of Everwinter was around 300 kilometers away, about the same size of the entire southernmost region. According to the map of the Land of Dawn drafted by the Union, the Rapture was the offspring of various extinct volcanoes. Lightning had seen eruptions of active volcanoes on the Searing Flame Islands, but they were nothing compared to the volcanoes here. 2 hours later, the exploration group reached the Rapture area. They finally saw the whole landscape that lay out magnificently before them. "It's so massive," Maggie exclaimed while flapping her wings. "I feel this hole could house an entire kingdom." Lightning nodded in approval. The Rapture was actually not a fault as she had thought, but a huge scar that ripped the earth apart. An immense invisible force underneath the ground had pushed the earth plates away from each other and formed cliffs on either side of the Rapture. If this scar was indeed the result of volcanic activities, what a huge eruption it would have been. Lightning and Maggie dropped and landed at 2 to 3 kilometers from the Rapture. As usual, Maggie approached the Rapture first, for she could merge herself perfectly into the surrounding environment without raising any suspicions of lurking enemies. "Listen," Lightning warned Maggie, "don't go too deep into the Rapture. Just take a peep at the entrance and come back. If you find anything out of character, report to me. Never go in there on your own, got it?" "I'll report to the captain first before making the next move," Maggie cut across her. I know, Ku. You told me a lot of times. You sound like His Majesty, Ku. Really? Ahem, anyway, it doesn't hurt to reiterate. I'll stay here and conduct a preliminary search in this area. I'll go no farther than 1 kilometer. Remember this particular spot, and we'll meet here in 30 minutes. Understood? Lightning said while scratching the back of her head, a little embarrassed. She remembered that Roland used to always remind her not to act alone. Because of this, Lightning had complained to her group members a lot, and boasted that an excellent explorer was born to know how to make correct judgments, and that such warnings were completely unnecessary. Now, she realized how childish she had been. "No problem, Ku." "Good. Off you go," Lightning said while patting Maggie on the shoulder. "Maggie, go!" Maggie yelled excitedly and flew toward the center of the Rapture. Lightning's eyes followed Maggie until the latter disappeared from her sight. She then started to survey the surroundings. Snowy owls were a type of birds commonly seen in this area. They belonged to the owl family. They had an excellent eyesight and were thus active during the day and at night. As long as Maggie proceeded with caution, it was not likely that she would expose herself. This district was a bleak emptiness of icebergs, without the slightest trace of wild animals. Maggie would be able to spot a demon immediately, if there was one. In consideration of these factors, the first place Maggie ought to look for should be hiding places. She had to think critically and solve problems herself. However, within 5 minutes, Lightning heard something flutter above her head. Lightning looked up with a start and saw Maggie plunge frantically and throw herself onto her. Demons, Ku!" Maggie shouted. The words sent a faint shiver through Lightning's heart. Were there God's stone mines here? She thus asked, "What did you find?" "A giant eye demon that is now lying on its stomach beneath the cliff, Ku." Maggie demonstrated with both her hands and feet. "I just passed the Rapture and looked into its eyes. That meant the eye demon had also seen her. Lightning was glad that she was not the one who had discovered the eye demon. A snowy owl would not catch the attention of the eye demon. Then? Did you cry out? Lightning pursued. Of course not. I'm a seasoned bird, no, a seasoned explorer, coo. Maggie swelled up. I didn't even blink. I just pretended to be looking around. Then I averted my eyes, coo. I bet it had already put me out of its mind, coo. Then Lightning saw what had happened in her mind's eye. A snowy owl stared at an eye demon and turned away. Oh, no! Lightning snatched up Maggie and streaked toward one of the shelters they had previously found. Coo? Maggie asked in bewilderment. The shelter was an ice cave a few hundred meters away hidden behind rocks. The cave had not yet been filled with snow, so it was large enough to accommodate one person. Lightning rushed into the cave, poked half of her head out of the cave and looked up. A moment later, a queer, shiny door suddenly appeared in midair. Then a demon walked out from behind the door and stood suspended right above the rapture. Lightning felt her chest constrict involuntarily, as though she were facing Ursruk again. The demon looked around cautiously before it dived. For a split second, Lightning felt all the blood within her freeze. It took her a great deal of efforts to suppress the urge to escape. However, she managed to stay put, as the demon was not aiming in her direction. The demon plummeted to the ground covered in snow, exhaling clouds of white flurries. When it straightened up again, Lightning saw a snowy owl in its clawed hand. Lightning swallowed hard, her hands involuntarily reaching for her own chest. Fortunately, that snowy owl was not Maggie. The demon gazed at the petrified snowy owl for a while and shook its head in disappointment before it released the bird. The owl screeched, soared into the sky, and disappeared from their sight. The demon did not linger. It stretched out its hand and ripped open the strange door and vanished in front of the two witches. Lightning heaved a deep sigh. They were safe for now. Coo, what do we do next? Maggie asked, a little crestfallen, for she had realized her mistake. Lightning would have taken another route to sneak into the rapture in the past. The rapture was so massive that it was impossible for the eye demon to cover every inch of the area. As an explorer, Lightning would like to be the first person who made the discovery. Nevertheless, she was now not only an explorer but also the captain of the Neverwinter Exploration Group, as well as the scout for the First Army. Whatever was hidden underneath the rapture, the presence of the eye demon and the senior demon indicated potential danger. She must return to Neverwinter as soon as possible to inform King Roland Wimbledon. Let's go to the Snow Ridge and meet up with the Tequila Witches, Lightning said through clenched teeth. This mountain range is no longer safe. Someone has clearly set foot in this area. Chapter 1206, Just a Breath Away. Have you found anything? An upgraded subordinate came up to Hacksword as it revealed from the distortion door. No. Hacksword said while studying its hands attentively. Probably the eye demon guard made a mistake. That does happen occasionally. You could take a rest at the Red Mist Pond, sir. I'll alert you if anything comes up. The subordinate paused for a second before it went on. Sir Valkyries always bathes in this pond. I think you could also relax your muscles in there every now and then. This was a pretty good idea. Hacksword did want to indulge in such a mundane pleasure and explore the beauty of the realm of mind. However, the king would not put blames on the nightmare if anything went wrong with the plan for the Western Front. Instead, Hacksword was the one who would bear all the consequences. After a moment of silence, Hacksword answered, "It would be too much for you to connect 4 eye demon guards at the same time. We've entered the most crucial stage of our plan, so I'd better monitor the situation myself. This is the last stronghold on the Western Front, and we mustn't fail the king." The subordinate's manner instantly tightened into formality as it heard the king's name. It replied fervently, "You're right, sir. I shall not let the king down." Valkyries was the one that let its guard down. Hacksword thought to himself expressionlessly. After Ursruk's tragic death at Tequila, this mountainous area became the focus of the Western Front plan. Hacksword exercised all its efforts to monitor this district. It had persuaded the front to spare 4 precious demon guards to monitor this area so that Hacksword could remain constant vigilance about lurking enemies. Demons, whose vision would not be restricted by distance, lighting conditions, or the size of objects, were the most astute observers. They could immediately sense enemies and inform the demons connected to them. As the connection required a great deal of magic power, only upgraded ones were qualified to connect with demons. The world that demons saw were extremely complicated. They would not be able to mobilize themselves if they accepted all the information they received. Therefore, demons would normally conduct a preliminary screening and evaluate each creature they beheld in advance. Only those who posed a real threat or act strangely would be informed to the connected demons. Hacksword had sensed unusual movements just a moment ago. Like the subordinate had said, demons did make errors from time to time. This was because creatures tended to have their own unique ways to respond to nature, and not all of their behaviors were comprehensible. There was, for example, someone as inscrutable as the king, and also eccentrics like the mask. Demons, which lacked independent and critical thinking skills, sacrificed a lot for the thousands of eyes that encrusted their heads. As such, even though they possessed enormous magic power, not a single demon had upgraded to a senior lord over the past thousands of years. Nevertheless, demons were still deemed as a rare species by the clan, whose birth rate was only a little higher than those of the Hatcher and the Mother of Soul. Hacksword changed the subject. "How's the revival of the birth tower going?" "It's almost done." "Everything's going well." "Very good. Take me there." "Yes, my lord." Due to the impact of God's stones, Hacksword could not go straight to the bottom of the valley and had to slowly make its descent through a flight of stairs. As they went down, the surroundings gradually turned into a whirl of crimson. The air was impregnated with the red mist, and the towering precipices formed a giant vessel, a natural container chiseled out of rocks, where the red mist could easily accumulate. After more than half a year of accumulation, the lower part of the rapture was now permeated with the thick, dense red mist that could support thousands of lives. However, Hacksword needed more than that. Only when they erected the birth tower from the Godstone mine could their kind truly survive on this land, without fearing a sudden disruption of the red mist supply. The sunlight was completely replaced by a ghostly blue-purple light at the very bottom of the rapture. A stone tower stood magnificently before Hacksword among the Godstone of punishment pillars. A faint tremor of excitement smote upon Hacksword. "No matter how many times I view it, it always awes me," the guard commented. "Before, we were only able to erect the tower when the origin of magic appeared." "Yes, but it isn't the second battle of divine will anymore," Hacksword said with a nod. This particular birth tower was actually not supposed to be here because it did not grow out of the Godstone mine but was an old one that had been set up a while ago. Although it currently relied on a huge base to support its weight, and its blotchy gray color signified a state of inactiveness, Hacksword knew this was just temporary. Soon, the tower would be reconnected to the Godstone mine via the Mother of Soul. This was the upgrade they had obtained from the legacy shards. Over the past 400 years, their understanding of magic power and magic stones had experienced various drastic changes. The most important change was that they slowly became less independent of the red mist. Nonetheless, human beings also made remarkable progress. Hacksword approached the tower base and gazed at the dormant Mother of Soul. The Mother of Soul was the origin of everything, the most important individual out of the whole clan. It would only reach its maturity when magic power reached its peak and when the divine will emerged. By that time, the Mother of Soul would be fused with the raw God's punishment stone. Within a few years, the God's stone mine would transform into a high tower that would further produce more red mist via magic power. Yet their new technology had considerably shortened this lengthy process. A fast-growing birth tower meant much less time to prepare for the war. As they would soon have ample red mist, they could even use the red mist as a weapon and quickly convert the enemy's territory into their own. There were nearly 100 inferior demons taking care of the Mother of Soul. They cleaned and fed her. In fact, the bottom of the Great Rapture was filled with thousands of such inferior demons. Through the window of the tower base, Hacksword saw those demons busy excavating the ground and transporting supplies. Some upgraded demons, on the other hand, were issuing commands on their bogle beasts. In the center of the rapture stood the symbiotic demon newly created by the mask. These powerful war machines would swarm toward their enemies upon an order. For a moment, Hacksword had an illusion that this place was the real front. In fact, this rapture was, in a sense, a front line. If they failed to stop human beings on this continent, their future would become dismally uncertain. They had to defeat the mankind here to save their civilization. Therefore, they must win this battle for the king. Chapter 1207, A New Idea. In Neverwinter, Grey Castle. Since the Longsong cannons were not portable, the artillery battalion had become exceptionally unoccupied these days compared to the gun battalion that had set out for the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter to execute Roland's immigration plan. Apart from the daily training and the harvest, off-duty soldiers all went back home to spend time with their families. Vanner also chose to go home. As the battalion commander, he rarely had free time these days, so Vanner treasured this rare opportunity to unite with his families. He also took the advantage of this break calling on neighbors and old friends. Since alcohol was expressively forbidden in the army, the only time Vanner could indulge in revelry was when he was off duty. After years of development, businesses in Neverwinter were currently far more dynamic and diverse than those in the old King's City. Under the influence of Roland's commercial district plan, the premises on either side of the street had now been in extremely high demand. Two-story premises were soon let out to shop owners and foreign merchants and were subsequently transformed into hotels, restaurants, and taverns. Comedies from various parts of the world were being constantly shipped to Neverwinter for sale. These shops supplemented the convenience market that mainly provided citizens with life necessities and staples. Vanner was impressed with the king's foresight as he wandered about on the street while surveying peddling vendors. The city was busy but not congested. Everything was in a strict order. Peddlers set up their booths in a designated area, pedestrians walked on the walkway paved with slabs, carriages ran in the middle of the road. Vanner remembered that someone had raised questions as to why they needed to broaden up the road in the beginning the construction work. Many people questioned about the necessity to create two respective lanes for pedestrians and wagons. Now, it appeared that it was quite a wise decision. Vanner suspected that Roland might have foreseen the future beforehand. After passing two main driveways, Vanner reached his destination, the Tavern Lucky Shell. As soon as he entered the store, a person limped up to him from behind the bar and greeted him. "Sir, there you are." "Just Vanner." "This isn't the army," Vanner said smilingly while pulling the bartender into a crushing hug. "How's your business going?" "It looks good, eh?" This person was known as Iron Crutch. Half a year ago, during that fierce night battle against the demons at Tower Station No. 1, a spear had penetrated Iron Crutch's abdomen and leg when he had been charging at the demons to retrieve the artillery field. He lost his consciousness on the spot. Although Nana later saved him, he still lost his right leg and had to replace it with an iron stick. That was how he got his nickname. Iron Crutch thus retired from the military service. He opened this lucky shell in the eastern city with the benefits received from the government and his salaries, and this tavern became where the First Army often met each other during their break. "Since I'm a retired veteran, the rent is relatively low for me." "I can manage," Iron Crutch said while messaging his hands in excitement. "If only you could come here a little more often." Vanner replied, "Then you'll have to wait for my retirement or when I'm like you. By the way, are Roan brothers here?" "They're both upstairs." "Let me take you up there." "No, that's fine. Don't worry about me. Come drink with us when you aren't so busy." "Sounds good," Iron Crutch agreed pleasantly. Vanner went upstairs and immediately saw his old friends sitting at a round table. Jop, Cat's Claw, Rodney and Nelson were all there. These people used to shudder at charging knights when the artillery battalion had first been founded. Now, they had all elevated themselves to military officers that the whole artillery battalion relied on. Because each of them had their own duties, they had not drunk together in the tavern for a while. Vanner joined them. They exchanged opinions on various matters ardently. The most frequent topic of discussion was naturally the army and the upcoming Battle of Divine Will. According to the king, this would be an unprecedentedly massive war that would involve the entire continent. They were not certain whether they could see each other again after the war ended. We're actually quite lucky. At least, we don't need to fight those monsters directly. Rodney drained his glass and sighed. If the artillery is defeated, then we pretty much lose the battle. The problem is that we don't know what new tricks demons will play. Remember that unexpected night attack at Tower Station Number 1? Cat's Claw commented while shrugging. I hope our soldiers could learn to cope with the demons themselves. They shouldn't wait for the gun battalion or the special unit of strategies and tactics to rescue them. Everyone assented in earnest. Exactly. If only we have powerful weapons as well. Revolving rifles could kill knights but not the demons. Drop it. I've heard that the army is going to use bolt rifles in the future. There'll be no revolvers anymore soon. Really? Commander, are you positive? Vanner confirmed with a nod in response to the others' inquiring look. The 1st unit and the 6th unit have already switched to the new weapons. It may take a while for all of us to have one due to limited production. Jop said, frowning. I tried the new gun once. It's powerful and accurate, but it's too slow for a close-range attack. Can't the artillery battalion keep using the old weapons? I'm afraid not. The management team has made the decision, Vanner replied while pointing at the ceiling. We use traditional black powder to operate revolvers. The bullet will be pretty much the same, so those who used to produce black powder could now help with the bullet production. Then, maybe we should ask Sir Iron Axe to persuade His Majesty to design a new weapon for us? Forget it, Nelson snorted. Brian will definitely butt in. Yes, the artillery battalion only needs cannons, Cat's Claw said with a perfect imitation of Brian's tone. Don't you often say that the barrels should be as large as possible? Leave those tiny ones to us gun battalion. Lads, drink on. The group of officers roared with laughter. Only Vanner remained silent. He gazed at his glass, apparently lost in thought. Commander? Vanner stroked his chin and said slowly, what if we create a weapon on our own? What weapon? A new flintlock? Cat's Claw asked, his brows raised. Commander, you're drunk, aren't you? Shut up. I'm not sure if you have noticed it. Both the grape shot guns used by the Special Unit of Strategies and Tactics and the Mark I type HMGs operated by the gun battalion are equipped with an air duct for steady firing, Vanner said meditatively. I've seen many disposed weapons. Although their structures are not always the same, they have pretty much the same mechanism. Air. Really? How come I don't know? That's why you aren't the commander, Rodney said sagely while twitching his lips. Having said that, we would need manpower and supplies to create weapons. Sir Iron Axe doesn't charge the plant that manufactures weapons. No, we aren't making weapons from scratch but are simply upgrading the ones we currently have, Vanner said, feeling more confident about what he was saying. It won't involve the plant or the administrative office. We just need a skillful worker. Cat's Claw, Rodney and Nelson all rested their eyes on Jop. Jop sighed deeply and raised his hands. Fine. My brother is working in the industrial zone. His job is to process and assemble steam engines. I'll take you there tomorrow. Chapter 1208, Vanner's Gun. The next day at noon, they went to the second mechanic plant in the industrial zone with Jop. After hearing the purpose of their trip, Jop's brother, Lafayette, showed great interest in Vanner's proposal. He took Vanner's rifle and fiddled the weapon affectionately before he asked, "Are we really allowed to do this? I was a miner, and what I'm now doing is simply some manual labor like sharpening and slicing." If I screw it up? Brother! Jop stopped him indignantly. One or two shouldn't be a problem. Guns break easily after all since we use them a lot during the training, Vanner said. However, if you break a lot, then it means that my method doesn't work. I won't blame you. I see, Lafayette said while nodding in excitement. Then leave it to me. I'll do my best, as machine tools in the plant aren't always available. Your brother seems to like flintlocks very much, Cat's Claw whispered to Jop. That's nothing unusual, Rodney rejoined. Who doesn't like powerful weapons? We used to flail swords and spears. Now we fire cannons and guns. Vanner also thought the same way. After witnessing the true power of the 12-pound field artillery, he gradually fell in love with weapons. Vanner opened the leather bag his friends brought with them, took out a disabled HMG and then handed a metal tube to Lafayette. Vanner said, "Let's begin." The barrel of the rifle was soon fixed to a drilling machine. Lafayette turned on the machine, aligned the drill with the mark on the barrel, and slowly moved the drill downwards. When the drill touched the barrel, the metal tube splintered into numerous tiny chips. It was a new experience for Vanner. Although he knew that both the steam engine and the long-song cannons were made of metal ingots, it was his first time witnessing the actual production. He was amazed when seeing the robust iron gradually melt and dissolve into various shapes. According to Lafayette, the machine tools in the second mechanic plant were all in their third generation powered by Dawn. Compared to the old machine tools driven by steam engines, the new ones were much more steady and quiet. In addition, they could start working anytime. Some skillful workers could even carve intricate patterns on a tiny iron rod the size of a fingernail. Yet Vanner did not require such exquisite skills. After reflecting upon his proposal for a night, he redrafted his plan. The principle was to use the least resources to attain his goal. The transformation of the gun should be simple and must not interfere with the daily operation of the plant. As such, he brought the air duct of Mark I, in a hope of simplifying the procedure and saving time. With a sample air duct, they could then easily ignite gunpowder. The problem, nonetheless, was how to keep up a steady fire. Vanner had developed a great interest in the HMGs used by the gun battalion a long time ago. During the War of the North Slope, he had played with those machine guns many times. One thing that Vanner was certain was that Mark I was much larger than rifles because it had a much more complicated recoil system. Further, the loading systems of the two weapons were also quite different. Machine guns required a cartridge, whereas rifles were only equipped with a clip. Therefore, it was impossible to copy the whole model. Even if his method worked, Iron Axe and Brian would not allow the artillery to use heavy machine gun parts. The best way to upgrade rifles was to just upgrade the barrel. That's pretty much it. Lafayette said as he cleansed the drill and compared the air duct and the rifle against the sunlight. These two barrels should be about the same length once we cut off the excessive part. Don't connect them as yet. Vanner stopped Lafayette as he produced a piece of paper from his pocket and spread it out. I want you to help me to make this spare part as well. There was a crude diagram on the paper. The part was in the shape of an arc, about 1 finger long and 2 fingers wide, with a groove in the middle. What's that? The other officers asked curiously. It doesn't look like a gun part. Vanner was not sure if this part would really work. It was simply one of his wild ideas that had yet been verified. However, he must not retract, so he said, if everything goes well, I believe this new part will replace our hands." 5 days later, many soldiers from the artillery battalion gathered at the 1st Army shooting range. They had learned from their superiors that a new flintlock that would enable the artillery to keep up a steady fire was currently under test. Unlike all the other weapons widely used by the Army, this weapon was invented by Commander Vanner instead of His Majesty. Many soldiers were intrigued by the news and came to see what this new weapon looked like during their break. To their dismay, the weapon under test could indeed fire steadily, although it did, from time to time, got jammed. As long as the user continuously pulled the trigger, the gun could eject multiple bullets at a time. Unlike the revolving rifles that could only fire 5 bullets, this upgraded one could fire 20, which would almost rival an HMG if multiple such upgraded guns fired at the same time. "I can't believe that you really made it," Cat's Claw remarked impressively. "Now I know why Sir Iron Axe chose you to be the commander. His Majesty taught me all this. Doesn't he always say that we need to apply what we learn from books to actual work?" "I simply did what His Majesty told us to," Vanner said triumphantly. He had not expected that his plan would work so well. Within just 5 days, he had created a new weapon. Next, they would only need to make a few adjustments and the artillery battalion would be able to increase the power of their guns significantly at a minimal cost. "Are you Commander Vanner?" someone asked suddenly. "Yes, you are," Vanner said as he turned around. "I'm Danny, a member of the sniper team," the man said with a smile. "I saw a lot of people here, so I came to see what's going on. I'm on duty today. Can I try out your new weapon?" "The sniper team?" Jop echoed, a little surprised, and then cast a glance at Vanner. Chief, Vanner knew that every single member of the sniper team was an elite picked by Brian from the gun battalion. The sniper team made its fame through the battle against the church at the Cold Wind Ridge. They received a medal from His Majesty for their outstanding performance. They were the best among the best and were also highly respected among the soldiers. If this new weapon caught the attention of the sniper team, wouldn't there be a possibility that the artillery battalion could finally overpower the gun battalion? In response to Jop and Cat's Claw's eager look, Vanner replied with a faint smile, "Of course. Please go ahead." Chapter 1209, Testing Result. Danny took the gun and instantly noticed that the center of the gravity had changed. The gun was, overall, heavier than a regular rifle. Apart from the second tube installed to the barrel, this new gun looked no different than an ordinary bolt rifle used by most of the soldiers in the gun battalion, although it was not as well made as his own high-precision rifle. The biggest change was that this additional metal tube ran all the way to the bottom of the barrel and was connected to the bolt. This must be the reason that the gun could keep up a steady fire. Danny took the aim and pulled the trigger. However, instead of locking his eyes on the muzzle, he gazed at the iron tube on one side of the barrel. As the gun trembled when the bullet escaped from the muzzle, something extraordinary happened. It was just a split second, but Danny noticed the change in the bolt. The rod in the iron tube was pushed forward and then retracted along with the metal shard attached to its end. This metal shard was normally fixed to the bolt. If someone tried to forcibly pull it, it would get jammed and break the rod. However, the groove in the middle of the shard enabled the bolt to retract and thereby unlock it. Then, the whole process reversed. The rod retracted to the tube and the bolt returned to its original spot. The metal shards slid back to the bottom and locked the bore again. This was such an ingenious design. This additional part was quite self-explanatory. Even a layman like Danny could immediately understand the mechanism behind it. Basically, the rod in the second iron tube replaced manual labor. What was clever about this design was that the rod completed 4 steps at a time, namely, pushing, pulling, lifting and pressing. Without any external force, the gun was automatically restored. Danny fired all the bullets, mesmerized by the pungent smell of gunpowder and that familiar voice that always visited him on the battlefield. "You missed 1 shot out of 20, Malt said. "Not used to the new weapon?" "I haven't got used to it yet. See if I miss any in the next round." "See what?" a surprised voice said to him. Danny pulled himself back to the present. He suddenly realized that this was not a battlefield, and a group of onlookers were watching him in the shooting range. Danny looked toward the confused artillery battalion commander as he rose and said while shaking his head, "No. I'm just mumbling. You're really an excellent sniper. 19 out of 20. That's really something, and you're still not satisfied," Vanner said while patting Danny on the shoulder. He then asked hopefully, "So, what do you think of this gun?" Danny knew about the competition between the artillery battalion and the gun battalion. Nevertheless, both of the 2 battalions served the king. He thus said honestly, "It's perfect, except it's a little unstable and heavy. I wish the sniper team could also have an upgraded weapon like this, if possible." If truth be told, the gun was as accurate as regular rifles when shooting targets were at 50 and 100 meters. Although it was a lot heavier than a rifle, the sniper team and the artillery battalion were not required to fire on standby or carry the weapon on the go. The greatest strength of this upgraded gun was that it enabled soldiers to keep up a steady fire. Since the current gun could not fire steadily, soldiers had to readjust their position and took the aim again after they missed their target. The repositioning normally took a few seconds, and more often than not, they lost track of the target. Therefore, they fired less frequently than ordinary soldiers. However, the upgraded gun minimized the readjustment and enabled soldiers to fire again immediately. This weapon would thus be very helpful for a massive warfare. Vanner was pleased to hear that his work received some kind of acknowledgement. He grinned. "It's just a preliminary design. If you could help us further improve the weapon, I would feel more comfortable when I talk to Sir Iron Axe." Vanner believed if the sniper team used the gun designed by the artillery battalion, then surely he outperformed Brian. Danny, on the other hand, agreed to help Vanner purely out of his personal affection toward firearms that could efficiently kill demons, the smell of gunpowder, and the voice of his ghost friend, Malt. Danny thus said, "I'm happy to be of service, Mr. Commander." The two of them smiled at each other and reached an agreement. Roland learned about this new weapon a few days later. As an increasing number of soldiers from the artillery battalion visited the 2nd Mechanic Plant, the superintendent of the plant reported the incident to the administrative office, who later forwarded the news to the Minister of Engineering, Anna. Roland was greatly amused by the duplicate sample created by Anna. The design was crude. Although the gun could fire steadily, it would easily break down since the additional metal tube was exposed in the air. The gun thus required extensive maintenance. Having said that, the artillery, after all, did not need to fire very frequently. "What do you think?" Anna asked smilingly. "Well, there's a lot that can be done, but it's a good sign," Roland said casually. "At least, it shows that soldiers start to think independently and know what kind of weapon they really need. The strengths of this gun are also very obvious, which are minimal costs and simple alteration. There would certainly be a huge increase in the consumption of bullets if the whole army started to use this new weapon." Fortunately, frontline soldiers who mainly relied on HMGs did not necessarily need to fire successively. "Well, in that case, let's help them," Anna said, nodding. The design of the weapon was soon finalized with Anna's assistance. The bolt and piston were replaced by a more flexible latch structure. Its joint was encased in a shell to stabilize the weapon, so the gun would not get easily jammed. After a part of the air duct was cut off, the weapon was officially upgraded. Roland advised that the new rifle should be named after Vanner. Soon after the news was announced, the Ministry of Engineering suddenly received tons of recommendations and feedback. Roland was pleased with the turn of the event. He finally saw the result of universal education. The success of his education plan excited Roland even more than the new weapon itself. Also, there was another piece of good news. Celine told him that there was a breakthrough in the research of the magic ceremony cube. She found a way to significantly reduce the consumption of uranium when she was making the 6th batch of cube replicates. Chapter 12:10, A Cube-Powered Vehicle. In the underground laboratory in the 3rd Border City, Roland immediately took Anna to the laboratory. Through the thick protection glass, he saw 2 activated magic ceremony cubes at the center of the laboratory. The wall of the laboratory was plastered with lead plates. One of the cubes looked quite normal while the other ejected much shorter red laser beams. "Is the one that ejects shorter red light the new replicate?" Anna asked perceptively. "That's right. Actually, it was purely an accident," Celine replied brightly. "Normally, Slim Wrist carves the patterns on the parts. If the materials are damaged, then it won't be easy to duplicate the patterns, so we normally dispose those damaged stones. However, a week ago when Slim Wrist was carving part number 236, we found the stone crack, which means this specific part is defective. Roland asked meditatively, but you didn't throw number 236 away? As all the materials used to create duplicates were collected from the southernmost region, and since those tablets had been buried underground for 1,000 years, it was normal to have damage here and there. Celine tapped her main tentacle and said, I thought it would be a waste to throw it away, so I kept it just in case. Then I installed it on the magic cube previously made to see whether it would function properly. Roland looked at Celine incredulously. That was a nuclear torture device. Don't worry, Your Majesty, Celine said as if seeing the thought in Roland's mind. She raised her blobbed head and continued, I conducted the test in the impassable mountain range. Nothing would happen to Neverwinter even if something went terribly wrong. This is a principle followed by the members of the Quest Society. You don't need to feel sad for me in the event I'm killed. For the sake of truth, I really can't care less about my personal safety. Looking at eloquent Celine, Roland realized his concern was unnecessary. He thus said, Now, your finding. Ahem, sorry, Celine said while clearing her throat. Anyway, just as what you've seen, the magic cube could still be activated, although the range of the red beam shortened by 90%. However, the Tri-Tank magic power unit could still transmit energies. I conducted a heating test to see whether the shortened red beam affected heat transmission. It took me 2 to 3 days to complete the test. When I examined the uranium chip, I was amazed to find that it did not change much. Also, it appears that much less magic power was consumed when the range of the red beam shortened. Anna asked thoughtfully, so, most of the magic power was used to maintain the red beam? I now understand why you became a senior which even faster than Agatha, Celine praised. It took me quite a while to reach the same conclusion. If that beam is comprised of numerous tiny particles, it'll be hard to direct them all to the same spot. The experiment indicated that the heat transmission on the front, left and right sides wouldn't be affected as long as you didn't touch the red beam. Therefore, I conclude that the decrease in the laser range did save a lot of power. Hang on, Roland interrupted suddenly. This means that part number 236 determines the radiation range? This was definitely a major discovery, even more important than the sustainability of the power system. There were around more than 300 parts in one magic ceremony cube. Nobody knew how magic power worked through those pattern stones. Now, there seemed to be a solution to analyze the power within the cube. Yes, Celine assented, a twinge of excitement in her voice. Perhaps the patterns on each part have a specific function. If we could decipher those patterns, we could probably understand how magic power worked within the magic ceremony cube. Each part functions differently. It looks like the Radiation Clan shared the same mindset with us, Anna said with a smile. Aren't we lucky? Of course, Roland confirmed with a nod. He knew what Anna meant. Civilizations varied drastically in terms of language, mindset, and appearance. It was almost impossible to find a similar one to learn from. The underground civilization, for example, could only operate the core device after transferring the soul to a carrier. Celine had spent hundreds of years trying to understand its mechanism, but the research was fruitless. Therefore, each civilization, in a way, was lonely. Although Roland had promised earlier that human beings could still learn from lost civilizations without the legacy shards, it was actually not easy to do so, especially when there was no guidance or assistance available. How could one learn about the other when they had different mindsets? If Celine was right, then the Radiation Clan, which was the first civilization that shared some similarity with the human race, might enlighten them on the research of magic power. By the way, Anna said as she suddenly grinned at Roland. Since the magic power unit has been finalized and we have also solved the sustainability problem, isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise? Gazing at Anna's bright, blue eyes, Roland found it hard to turn down her request. Yes, yes. Your Highness, he said while smiling back. I'll start working on it once I'm back to the castle. The dawn broke with loud noises. Soraya sat up from her bed in a daze. She yawned dramatically and fumbled for her clothes. These were the noises produced by steam engines that she heard every morning. They marked the beginning of another busy day. But she noticed it was particularly early today. Soraya cast a glance at Echo, who was still deep in her sleep, and put on her clothes quietly. She wondered who else in the castle got up earlier than her. Then Soraya suddenly realized that this was not the industrial zone. Why were there noises of steam engines? It was weekend today, and most of the witches slept in. The castle would be empty until it was time for lunch. Was she dreaming? The roar started again outside the window, and Soraya heard someone talk and laugh sprightly. "This is so interesting. Your Majesty, let me try it." Me too, me too." "What happened?" Echo asked blearily as she rose. "I don't know. It's probably Mystery Moon," Soraya said as she stretched and pulled back the thick curtains. Sunlight spilled across the room through the window. It was actually not early anymore. After she became more comfortable with the sudden brightness, she peered down from her window and was surprised at what she saw. Many witches were congregated at the castle gate, staring at something at the center of the yard, looking excited. Soraya then saw Anna sitting in a peculiar four-wheeled carriage. There were no horses, but the vehicle ran on its own. Anna's face split into a big smile. Immediately, Soraya's eyes were glued to the strange vehicle. Chapter 12:11, A Farming Tractor. Your Majesty, what's Lady Anna driving?" Roland turned around and saw Echo and Soraya rush toward him. "It's a car, a magic cube-powered car." Mysterious Moon supplied the answer fervently. "If you want to drive it, go line up." Car?" Soraya echoed, "A car powered by a steam engine?" "Yup, but the boiler of the steam engine has been replaced by the relic of the Radiation Clan, so that's why it's so small," Mystery Moon boasted. "It's still a lot larger than an electric motor though. I wish it could be powered by Dawn Eye." "That'll be perfect." "No, then we should call it a magnet-driven car." "You can barely manage to work with dozens of copper rods," Lily retorted while twitching her lips. "And now you want to power a car?" Mystery Moon faltered. I just came of age, so obviously I'm not that powerful. Perhaps I could manufacture tons of Dawn Eye after I upgrade." "I would rather put my hope in Miss Doris," Lily said scathingly. "Shut up, or I'll take away all your chaos drinks." "I dare you, ha!" Phyllis burst into a laughter. "Actually, no matter it's powered by steam or electricity, we still call it a car. "Really?" all the other witches said together while looking toward her. "Yes, in the dream world, it's called a car," Phyllis replied triumphantly. "The cars in the dream world are much better than this one Her Highness is now driving. They could not only shelter us from rain and wind, but they're also equipped with an advanced heating and air conditioning system. It's pretty much like a mobile house, and it's a lot faster than horses." "Have you driven a car before?" Mystery Moon asked, her eyes widening in curiosity. "Of course," Phyllis bragged. "I once drove His Majesty's vehicle on an endless highway. The vehicle literally trembled when I drove at the maximum speed. I could only hear wind howling around me, and I felt I could conquer the whole world." Roland mopped his forehead, amazed that Phyllis could drive his battered minivan in the same manner as she drove a luxurious sports car. The truth was that his vehicle had poor noise insulation and it always wobbled violently on highways. Nevertheless, even the old minivan functioned better than this cube-powered vehicle. It had taken Roland only 4 days to complete the production. The vehicle was comprised of a steam engine at the front, a heating system at the rear, a power unit attached to the automobile frame, and a couch in the middle. Apart from a steering wheel, a clutch and a brake, the vehicle had no gearbox but only a valve next to the seat to adjust the speed. Once the magic ceremony cube heated up the water and set the steam engine in motion, the vehicle would start to move. As the air pressure in the conduits increased, the vehicle accelerated. Then the driver could switch the valve on to release some steam so that the steam engine would not overload. In this way, the driver adjusted the speed of the vehicle. In other words, the driver simply needed to press on the brake and the clutch to slow down and release the brake to accelerate. Due to the high air pressure, the spinning cogwheel might sustain some extent of damage. Therefore, once the vehicle came to a complete stop, the driver must open the valve to release the steam and reduce the air pressure in the steam engine. Despite the cumbersome power unit, the primitive automobile frame, and the crude steering device, Anna was over the moon. Like a little girl who had just received the best present in the world, she drove around the yard with the slightest intention of taking a rest. In addition to Anna, the other witches were also aroused by the vehicle. They exchanged excited murmurs. It was the first time they laughed so heartily after the Battle of Tequila. Roland wished Tilly could share this happiness. Nightingale told him that Tilly invested most of her time in training aerial knights, so she rarely came to the castle lately. Perhaps, for Tilly, the happiest thing was to defeat the demons. When Anna finally alighted from the vehicle and asked who would like to try out, all the witches pressed forward to take the share. Sylvie, who was the first to arrive at the scene and spot the car, got the opportunity to drive. "How do you like it?" Roland asked Anna. "It's more fun than I thought," Anna replied with a smile. "Thank you, Roland. I'm so glad that you taught me how to drive." Roland dazed for a second as he saw Anna's face split into a dazzling smile. He quickly averted his eyes, a little embarrassed, as though he had suddenly traveled back to the time when they had first met. Roland said, "Well, I'm glad you like it." Anna blinked and said, "By the way, Celine found a way to stabilize the magic ceremony cube. Does it mean that we could use the cube in the Battle of Divine Will?" "Technically, we could," Roland replied on a cough and pulled himself together. "We just need to keep supplying water to make sure that the cube-powered steam engine works. Time will tell how much this new steam engine could help with the logistics. Can we use the steam engine to create an armored war machine with a long-song cannon anchored to the top?" Phyllis cut in. "If you could make such a weapon, then we don't have to be afraid of the spider demons anymore." It was true that a competent power unit would make an armored unit possible. With a powerful tank, they could instantly dominate the war. Even the crudest tank could easily repulse mad demons and block spears and bone needles ejected by spidery monstrous beasts. It was a weapon as well as a defense. Nevertheless, extensive research was required to create such an advanced weapon. Not only did they have to improve technologies, but they have to also educate workers. Anna could not manufacture the biplanes and the armored weapons at the same time. It was also unrealistic to directly create a tank. In short, considering the limited technologies and resources, most of the work had to be completed by plant workers. The first project that came to Roland's mind, however, was not a tank or an infantry fighting vehicle but a transportation tool for civil services. This transportation tool could considerably increase farming efficiency while saving a lot of manpower. As the principle and technologies applied to this transportation tool were quite similar to those related to armored vehicles, Roland could also, at the same time, provide soldiers with some training. Meanwhile, workers in the plant could also immediately start to produce armored weapons, if necessary. This transportation tool was a tractor. Chapter 12:12, Rainbow Stone. "Ah! Help! I can't steer it around. Someone help me!" A piercing shriek interrupted Roland's train of thought. Roland looked up and saw the vehicle dash toward the flower bed at the center of the yard. In the vehicle sat Mystery Moon. You idiot!" Lily said through clenched teeth. "Hit the brake!" "I did, but it doesn't work, aw!" Mystery Moon screamed in terror. The car ran wild. It bounced off the flower bed and streaked toward the castle gate. "Your Majesty, watch out!" Wendy shouted. There was instantly a great commotion. "Holy crap," Roland said within himself, gaping at Mystery Moon who steered the vehicle frantically with her eyes clamped shut. He was astonished that a car without gas could go so wrong. What a monstrous driver Mystery Moon was. Much to Roland's consternation, the crowd was not dispersed. All the witches, on the contrary, stopped in front of the car. In a second, All the witches applied their various abilities. Anna summoned a black firewall, Lotus created a ditch to separate Roland from the yard, Iffy summoned her magic cage, and Andrea was about to shoot her light arrow. Nightingale grabbed Roland by the arm, ready to drag him into the mist any time. In the end, Phyllis and Lorger stopped the vehicle by force. They grasped the bumper of the vehicle and lifted the car off the ground. Then Anna turned down the magic ceremony cube with her black fire. The steam engine was immediately silenced. Ow! Run, guys! Mystery Moon yelled hysterically, her hand still on the steering wheel. You big thickhead! Lily strode across the ditch and slammed her hand on the back of Mystery Moon's head. Her scream instantly perished into a grumble. Mystery Moon opened her eyes, her hands on her head, looking perfectly innocent. Mystery Moon. Seeing Wendy and Scroll dart in her direction in a hot rage, Mystery Moon realized that she had made a big mistake. She pleaded, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but it was too late. She had been dragged out of the vehicle and into the castle before she could justify her behavior. You always cause trouble. No time off for you this week. I order you to copy the rules of the Witch Union 100 times. And you also have to complete 5 sets of homework before dinner. Mystery Moon's cry reverberated across the whole yard. All the witches shuddered at the long murmur of echoes, except Anna. I examined the vehicle. There's nothing wrong with the steering wheel or the brake, Anna said to Roland. There's only one reason why Mystery Moon lost control. What's that? She's not strong enough to maneuver the car, Anna said with a magnificently forgiving air. Roland laughed at such an amusing truth. It appeared those who were weaker than Mystery Moon probably could not drive the car unless he installed an assisting mechanism to the steering wheel and the brake. Lotus and Anna soon fixed the yard. Looking at a group of witch who was not able to disguise their eagerness, Roland said while shaking his head, if you still want to go on a ride, then talk to Anna. As long as she agrees, I don't have any objections. Just make sure that you don't destroy the castle. Right, another thing. Don't forget to come back for lunch. Yes, Your Majesty. Please let me have a go first. Hey, I came here before you. The yard was again alive with laughters. Sir, it's here. A carriage staggered to a halt in front of a tavern. Victor Lothar alighted from the wagon and tossed 2 silver royals at the coachman before he got in. Mr. Victor, a pretty young lady in a white robe, greeted him at a trot. She took the luggage from Victor and said ardently, we keep the room for you. Please, this way. Victor's room was the largest one on the top floor. Everything was just as the same as when he had departed last time, including incenses, grape wines, and his personal maid, Tinkle. Victor nodded in satisfaction. This was the power of money. Although it could not bring the dead to life, it could freeze time. It has been a while since last time you were here, Tinkle said as she pulled back the curtains, opened the window and poured him a cup of tea. My boss thought you encountered bandits or died in a shipwreck. He asked the accountant to check the gold royals you left here every day to see how long we can keep the room for you. He wants to let out this room to someone else but at the same time doesn't want to break Neverwinter contract law. It's really amusing to see that he was caught in such a disgusting dilemma. Victor felt his fatigue gradually dissipated as he listened to his maid babbling. He asked, aren't you afraid that he'll know that you badmouth him behind his back? Tinkle stuck out her tongue and said, unless you tell him. By the way, where have you been? Was it a great undertaking? Well, sort of, Victor said while sipping the tea. I spent most of my time in the Southern Territory in the past half a year. The Southern Territory? Tinkle echoed in confusion, her head lopsided. That area isn't famous for gemstones, is it? There are gemstones everywhere, provided that you know where to find them, Victor said, shrugging. For example, in the South, gemstones grow on trees. Sir, you must be making fun of me, the maid said a little indignantly. Victor smiled. He knew Tinkle would not believe him. In fact, he could not believe it either before he actually saw it. The cotton field was, to his surprise, even more beautiful than gemstones. The plants cultivated by Leaf were incredible. The cotton was large and soft like snow, completely different from the one he used to see. Victor had been busy in the past few months. He summoned all the tailors in his native town, built a plant at the Port of Clearwater, and hired staff to work for him. Once the harvest season was over, he started to sell the cotton to the public. His business was better than he had initially anticipated. As this new cotton was affordable and high quality, they soon outstripped their competitors. All his products were fairly popular, from cotton blankets all the way to cotton winter jackets. Nevertheless, Victor knew that competition always existed. He knew when other merchants also started to purchase cotton seeds from Leaf, his market would inevitably shrink a little bit. Therefore, apart from common cotton fabrics, he also produced high-end commodities, which were mainly clothes tailored to wealthy customers. All the clothes were carefully designed and made, with a tiny logo of a colorful gemstone at sleeves and collars that marked the uniqueness of his products. Those clothes were soon acknowledged by a certain group of people and were subsequently called Rainbow Stone. Victor thus also granted the same logo to his low-end products such as blankets and robes, only that the logo is monochrome. Victor predicted that even if other merchants sold their products at a lower price than his, people would still tend to buy his products because of the Rainbow Stone logo. Just like jewelry, nobles always preferred to purchase those processed by masters over the ones that were not. "How long are you going to stay here this time?" Tinkle asked after a long silence. "Probably 3 or 4 days. I have a lot to do in the Southern Territory," Victor replied. "That soon?" the maid asked in a low voice. Victor understood that Tinkle would have to serve other customers if he decided to surrender the tenancy. She preferred to clean a vacant room than serving customers. Victor did not really care about the possible change, but he did like Tinkle to serve him. He had not got tired of her yet. "Don't worry. I'll pay a good amount of gold royals before I return to Neverwinter." "Really?" Tinkle said, her facing lighting up. "That isn't much, really," Victor said while straightening up and tossed a gold royal at Tinkle. "This is your pay. I need to pay a visit to the administrative office. Lead the way." Chapter 12-13, The Beginning of an Enterprise. Over the past 6 months, although Victor Lothar had stayed in the Southern Territory, he had paid close attention to Neverwinter, for he believed that this city would undoubtedly become the central city of the world in the future. The impact of this future capital would extend to not only Grey Castle but also the other 3 kingdoms and the fjords. Therefore, Victor asked his men to purchase Grey Castle weekly and send a copy to the Port of Clearwater every day. He returned to Neverwinter because of 2 major events that had caught his attention. One was the sale of the Miracle Building and the other was the release of a new magic movie, The Dust of History. Victor did not understand why the King of Grey Castle insisted that Neverwinter people had to show their identification cards to purchase the apartment. As a Neverwinter resident, he could still travel to the Port of Clearwater in the City of Glow. Victor did not know what the point of having a Neverwinter identification card. He was a merchant and basically traveled the world all the year around. Nevertheless, nobody would miss the opportunity to become a resident of the tallest apartment building on this continent situated at the center of the new King's City. It was a perfect marketing strategy to further promote his brand, Rainbow Stone. However, even if Victor failed to obtain a room in the Miracle Building, he would not feel too regretted about it. As the designated distributor of the new cotton seeds appointed by King Roland, Victor was confident that he could outperform all other merchants. For him, he was interested more in the magic movie than the real estate transaction. He would never forget the first magic movie he had seen. It was mind-blowing. The moment the curtains had been pulled back, Victor had felt his physical body melt into nothingness, his soul wandering in the darkness. He had watched The Wolf Princess many times, and would have watched over and over again had he not decided to grow cotton in the Southern Territory. Victor had the faintest clue as to the content of the new magic movie The Dust of History. However, he was particularly intrigued by the movie because of 2 reasons. One was that all the actors in the movie were from the Starflower troupe, and the other was that the screenwriter this time was famous Cajun Fells. According to the introduction of the movie, it was based on a true story, and King Roland had even provided assistance with the background research. It was rumored that the king had disclosed a book that had been kept as a secret by the royal family for generations. Victor knew he should not take these rumors circulated among the public too seriously. The best way to confirm the validity of the information was to watch the magic movie himself. How could he miss it? This was actually the main reason Victor came back to Neverwinter. As soon as Victor reached the administrative office, Tinkle went to line up to purchase the tickets. Each ticket cost 50 gold royals, which was 10 gold royals more than the ticket for the Wolf Princess. However, Victor immediately gave Tinkle 100 gold royals and asked her to buy 2 tickets. Tinkle felt a surge of pride. Many people eyed her as she bought 2 tickets at a time. The price for the premiere was so daunting that even foreign merchants would hesitate for a while before making the decision. In fact, the ticket would be a lot cheaper the next day, and the price would further drop to 10 silver royals for civilians a week later. The transaction of the apartment was much more complicated. After Victor submitted the application, he and Tinkle were led into a small cabin. "I can't believe that you have a Neverwinter identification card," Tinkle said in a hushed voice. "But you aren't a Grey Castle man, and certainly aren't a resident of Border Town either," Victor said, shrugging. "You've forgotten that one could become a Neverwinter resident as soon as he purchases a property here." "Of course I know," Tinkle defended herself. "But you always live in the tavern." "That doesn't prevent me from having a real estate property here," Victor said airily. "I prefer a tavern to a residential area, but I can still buy a property just in case." Tinkle was speechless, her eyes wide open. Victor thought that was the beauty of a country girl. If Tinkle were a lady, she would have probably viewed him as an idiot. Just then, a young lady in a uniform came in. "Hello, thanks for waiting. My name is Betty. I'm a clerk at the administrative office, and I'll be responsible for registration. I'm Victor Lothar. I reviewed your application, and you're eligible to make a purchase." Betty said quickly, "I have to admit that you have a really good taste. Out of all the residential buildings, you picked the Miracle Building. This is the landmark of Neverwinter. You can have a bird view of the whole city. Although the price is a little high, it's definitely worth it." Mildly taken aback, Victor suddenly had a strange feeling that not many people were buying. He thus cleared his throat and asked, "So, how much is it?" "Here it is, Mr. Victor," Betty said as she handed him a piece of paper. Victor spread it open, a muscle twitching around his lips. The prices of all the floors of the Miracle Building were listed. The first 5 floors were under 100 gold royals. From the 5th floor onward, the price doubled by each floor. The 14th floor was listed as 2,000 gold royals. Tinkle clapped his hand over his mouth. "The 15th floor is not for sale?" Victor asked as he noticed the floor was not priced. The Astrology Association and the Alchemist Workshop have jointly bought the 15th floor. I've heard they're planning to found a Society of Sage and make it as the headquarters. I'll take the 14th floor. Victor cut across Betty, who looked as aghast as Tinkle. He then added, "I'll take 2. For 1,000 gold royals was a large sum of money even for Victor. He had been hesitating at first, but after hearing the news of the Society of Sage, he immediately made up his mind. If Neverwinter was the central city of the future, then this so-called headquarters would definitely influence the entire kingdom. If he could associate his business to these 2 eminent organizations, it would be very helpful to further promote his products, even though what he did was simply sharing the same building with the 2 societies. "A wise choice, Mr. Victor," Betty said while holding Victor's hand in excitement. "I'll bring the contract right away. Once you sign, the 2 rooms will be yours." Watching Betty rush out of the room, Victor heaved a deep sigh and said, "I somehow feel that she is the buyer, not me." "It probably has something to do with her sales target," Twinkle mumbled. "What's that?" "I heard about it from customers coming to the tavern. It appears that every official and clerk in the administrative office is subject to periodical evaluations. I don't know about the details, but the evaluation determines whether they could get a raise or get promoted. I see. Now I see why everyone here works so hard, Victor muttered. This was something new he could learn from. Perhaps he could also implement a similar system in his textile mill. By the way, Tinkle said hesitantly, you aren't leaving the rooms vacant, are you? You spent so much money on them. So, are you still living in the tavern? I'll continue to live there, Victor said smilingly. But the rooms I bought with 4,000 gold royals won't be vacant either. But you can't live in two places at the same time. It doesn't mean I'm going to use it as a residence. I'm planning to make it as the new headquarters of Lorther Corporation, the headquarters for Rainbow Stone. In the beginning, Victor had only planned to purchase one room and hang a banner outside to advertise Rainbow Stone, but Betty's words inspired him. He could use the room for something else. Chapter 12-14, The Second Magic Movie. 2 days later, Victor went to the movie theater. The premiere of the movie The Dust of History was at 3 p.m. He arrived at the theater pretty early and waited to check in. The movie theater had expanded a great deal since his last visit a year ago. There were not only several new movie halls but also a yard and a waiting area for customers. Although Victor came here half an hour early, the hall had been packed when he got here. Are you Mr. Gammon from the Chamber of Commerce of the Crescent Moon Bay? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. I didn't expect to meet such a successful businessman from the Kingdom of Dawn like you. Are they actors from Cajun's troupe? I wonder if I could meet Cajun himself. Please present me to him if you ever get a chance. Sure thing. The audience started to make conversations. As Victor had expected, those who could afford the premiere were all prominent figures. This was also one of the benefits to attend the premiere. Hey, aren't you Mr. Victor? I've heard that you're no longer in the jewelry trade, are you? Someone said to him abruptly. I'm still doing my old trade, but the business isn't good at the moment. I like your blankets. More customers come to my hotel after I use your products. I would like to order 100 more. I'm glad to hear that. We could have a chat after the magic movie. Sounds good. Tinkle's eyes were wide open as she listened to their conversation. To her, it was unimaginable to suddenly have such a big order over a casual chat. When Victor was finally alone, she tugged his sleeve and asked, Sir, are these people coming here for the movie or business? I notice many of them don't really know you. Aren't you afraid that they're frauds? Don't worry. It's very common among entrepreneurs. Just get used to it, Victor said smilingly. Only successful businessmen were financially capable of attending this grand premiere. To some extent, this premiere told more about their financial status than any jewelry they were wearing, because the theater experience was, essentially, an intangible service that would not give audience any monetary benefits. While Victor was explaining to Tinkle, someone bumped into him. Ah, sorry, Victor apologized. However, he was rooted to the ground after he saw the woman. It was a lifeless face, although quite pretty. Perhaps, the lady would have been even prettier than Tinkle had she put on some makeup. Nevertheless, her pale skin and absent look abhorred him. The sullen expression that the woman was wearing formed a glaring contrast with the animated atmosphere in the hall. The woman did not say anything but simply cast him an indifferent glance before she drifted off. What a weird person. Victor mumbled. Sir, the magic movie is starting in a minute. Let's get in, Tinkle, who apparently had not noticed anything, urged while grasping Victor's hand. Right, yes, Victor said. He soon put the lady out of his mind and followed Tinkle into the hall. What happened just now? Joe asked Farina a little apprehensively. Nothing, Farina answered in a low voice. Someone bumped into me. Let's go. Since you brought me here, let's just get in. Right, Joe stammered, not sure whether he should hold Farina's hand, and finally decided not to do so. Remember that you shall stay with me, no matter what happens. Farina remained silent. This was the best she could do to come here with him. After staying in Neverwinter for nearly half a year, Farina gradually came to the realization that the ancient witch who claimed to have been living for 400 years did not lie to her. Her wounds slowly healed up. Although the whip and brand marks persisted, she could at least walk on her own. Farina found herself have nothing to complain about. Had she fallen into any pure witch's hands, she would have suffered more tortures. Neverwinter witches did treat her fairly well. However, the trial Farina had been waiting for did not come. She had not even got a chance to meet the King of Grey Castle. Farina was simply questioned by dozens of people. She had even lied, in an attempt to provoke the interrogators, but they simply gave her a searching look with an air of derision. After Farina was released from the prison, Joe bought a house to settle her down. Unlike her, Joe, as a former noble, soon found a job at the administrative office and quickly adapted to the new environment. If truth be told, Joe should not have been a church member in the first place. However, the life in Neverwinter tormented Farina. The longer Farina lived in Neverwinter, the more she realized how wrong the church had been. The witches were not the representation of evil. Apart from magic power, they were no different from ordinary people. Roland Wimbledon did not turn the city into hell with the power of witches but instead made people's life even better. Farina was torn between her belief that she had been indebted for half of her life and the glaring reality. Perhaps, this was the trial. Sometimes, it could be more brutal than tortures. She would have ended her own life had Joe not needed her. Farina didn't know how long she could live like that. Dimly, she knew the 2 tickets sent from the Starflower Troupe would be her last straw. Cajun Fells created this movie on King Roland's request. The sole purpose of this movie was to disclose the truth about the church and thus further secure the dominant position of the Wimbledon family. Farina could imagine that the church would become what everyone loathed after this movie. The sacrifice of Pope Tucker Thor and numerous Judgment Warriors killed in action would then become nothing but a joke. Farina did not want this to happen, but she still agreed to come with Joe. Just as she had not refused the request of the church executives and agreed to stay behind to fight for Hermes. Because Joe needed her. Yet this was probably the last thing she could do. Light gradually faded out. Darkness fell on the hall, and the magic movie began. The story started on the Hermes Plateau 300 years ago when the new holy city was simply boulders and rocks. A sheer drop of cliffs, the vast bleakness of the land covered in snow, and the great rapture down the impassable mountain range swarmed into his view. Although Victor had watched magic movies many times, he was still quite shocked as the whole continent dwarfed beneath him. Across the great rapture, many church members were building their new city, as though this was really what had happened 300 years ago. A moment later, the audience saw a huge hole in the ground. Victor heard the name Preval Council, which was the most secretive organization of the church. A murmur, at this point, swept over the hall. Victor knew everybody was as surprised and intrigued as him and believed that this was probably the hidden history once only known to the royal family. Soon, the story caught Victor's attention. It was rumored that a disastrous war broke out every 400 years. When the war started, a bloody moon would appear in the sky, and many enemies would creep out of hell and crush the mankind. For the sake of the human race, witches offered their blood to warriors and obtained incredible power. This was the truth of the gods' punishment warriors. To make sure this plan was successful, witches established the church and started to select potential warriors. The main character of this movie was a witch, and she was also the successor of the current pope. Another main character was the Pope's guardian, the commander of the Judgment Army. Like the majority of plays, the 2 main characters, after overcoming the initial prejudice and hostility against each other, finally fell in love. The witch and the guardian promised to each other that once there was a successor to take over the Pope position, they would attend the incarnation ceremony for the God's punishment army and never part again. It was such an ingenious stroke that Cajun Fells told this beautiful love story in such an emotional, unobtrusive manner. The excellent performance of the actors from the Starflower Troupe further moved the audience. Tinkle even wept when she saw the couple make vows. However, the situation suddenly turned for the worse. The Guardian's father, having a strong desire for power, framed the Pope and usurped the throne. The witch, as a candidate for the next Pope, naturally became the first obstacle he was going to remove. He thus asked his son to kill the girl, but the Guardian refused his request with inflexible determination. It was a scheme that the usurper had conspired for a long time. When the couple discovered the conspiration, it was too late to change the situation. The couple thus decided to flee Hermes and inform the king situated at the foot of the plateau of this incident. However, the Guardian's father sent soldiers to catch them. Apparently, he was determined to kill the young man and the woman. The movie reached its climax when a battle broke out at the Cold Wind Ridge in Grey Castle. A unit of the Judgment Army soon caught up with the witch and the Guardian. It seemed that the two unfortunate lovers were doomed. When the tension between the two parties became almost unbearable, something incredible happened. "Please, help us! Please," the Guardian yelled, panting, and suddenly turned around. He grasped Victor frantically. Victor felt a coldness steal through him, and he shuddered uncontrollably. It took him all his efforts not to cry out loud. "They're there! Get them! Anyone who resists us will be viewed as their accomplices. We're going to kill all of you," the soldiers shouted, their arms aloft in the air. I'm not," Victor said with great difficulties, his throat dry. Words failed him, and the Judgment Warriors had already pulled the trigger. An arrow brushed past his cheek. At the same time, Victor felt a sting. His hand rubbed on his cheek tremulously and he peered down at his fingers. There was a faint hint of crimson on them. Chapter 12:15, The Reoccurence of the Legend. Farina, surprisingly, found that her last straw had not fallen upon her yet. It was hanging by a thin thread only a few feet above her. The story portrayed by the magic movie was very similar to the truth disclosed by the ancient witch, only that it did not repudiate the church totally. When Farina saw the main characters make all their efforts to save the church and shoulder the responsibilities of fighting against the enemies from hell, she felt a warmth long since forgotten wash over her. Her hand balled into a fist when she saw more than half of the executives conspire against the Pope, and had a sudden urge to beat them into the ground. These people forgot the initial purpose of establishing the church and turned the church into a hideous monster. What she loathed the most was that these executives kept the existence of demons from the public and people who were dedicated to saving the world like Tucker Thor. These faithful warriors did not die for a noble cause as they had believed. Instead, their death merely became a tool that those obnoxious leaders used to keep a firm grip on power. Farina should not have put her faith in a church like that. She did not understand why the King of Grey Castle did not reveal the dark side of the church. Wasn't it a perfect opportunity to further criticize the church and wipe it off people's memories? Or was it because he had never taken the church seriously? While Farina was dealing with a multitude of thoughts in her mind, the soldiers from Hermes caught her attention. For a person who had completely lost hopes, nothing could really perturb her mind. However, now, Farina was touched, and her power slowly came back to her. As one of the best soldiers in the Judgment Army, Farina could sense even the slightest change in the surroundings. She felt the ground underneath began to quaver. The ground shook as the Judgment Army drew near. Farina had lived in Hermes for 5 to 6 years, so she was familiar with the pattering of horse hooves against the ground. She could instantly tell the number of the soldiers and how far they were without even looking at them. There were 16 horses, 2 units of troops. But she knew her feeling was not real. The magic movie was just an illusional image. Even though it felt so real, it was still not reality. As she was totally merged into the surroundings, all her senses had sharpened. Farina realized something had changed. Then she could again feel her body. What happened? But something more incredible occurred. She saw other people who were watching the magic movie rise in front of her. Including Joe. "Farina, what the?" Joe asked blankly as he turned around. Suddenly, a sense of evil foreboding possessed her. Farina made an abrupt snatch in the air but caught nothing. The chair underneath her had disappeared. "Please, help us. Please," the guardian and the witch pleaded hysterically. They had now noticed the audience and started to run toward them. "The traitors are here. Get them. Anyone who resists us will be viewed as their accomplices. We're going to kill all of you." A few more arrows cracked through the air, and people at the front fell. Most viewers were board members of chambers of commerce or members of a prominent family who had never experienced a war. For a second, they were all framed to the spot. "Damn it!" Farina swore. What were those witches doing? Was she hallucinating? Farina would have shouted this as a nasty snare set up by the witches. "Everyone, follow me in the past," to calm down the audience. However, she fought down the urge, pushed Joe aside and rushed up to the front before all the audience. She yelled, "Stop! I'm the commander of the Vanguard Battalion of the Judgment Army, Farina." "Who are you?" The soldiers reined their horses and asked, "The Vanguard Battalion? How come I've never heard of it?" "Oi, what's your commander's name?" "The great priest of the Preval Council, Sir Tafon," Farina lied. In the meantime, she put her hand at her back and gestured the couple to hand her a weapon. "What?" Hearing Farina's answer, the leader of the unit hesitated. The guard wavered as he heard the name Preval Council. Apparently, this secretive organization had quite a deep influence on church members. Yet Farina knew it would not completely stop them. The priest was obviously not as influential as the new throned pope. She must fight before the other party did. Unfortunately, the guardian did not really understand her gesture. He simply shuffled toward her with a sword in his hand. "Why aren't you wearing the armor of the Judgment Army?" the soldier asked as he got off his horse and motioned his men to come with him. "Because we're on a special mission," Farina said placidly. "I'm sorry. I must bring the traitors back to Hermes. This is the Pope's order. Also, I must take you as well. I'm sure Sir Tafon would understand it. Is there no alternative?" "No," the soldier said resolutely while placing his hand on the hilt. "All right, I'll come with you," Farina sighed. "As for Sir Tafon, what's the matter with him? He's dead, only 300 years later." At these words, Farina quickly drew out the guardian's sword and thrust it through the unit leader's helmet. Blood spilled all over her. Captain! Kill them!" Farina grabbed the unit leader's weapon and fought fiercely against the other soldiers. The guardian finally realized what was happening and also joined her. "This woman is so difficult to deal with. Darn it! Where's my bow? Shoot her! Don't let the witch go." It was total chaos. Many people fell to the ground, and the audience goggled at the screen, flabbergasted. Farina knew there was no chance of winning since she was not wearing an armor. They had 16 people whereas there were only 2 of them. It was a matter of time that she got injured. Soon she was wounded, but the pain searing through her did not slow her down. On the contrary, she fought even more ferociously. For the first time since she had waken up, Farina felt contented. "How dare you defy the church?" the soldiers bellowed. "The church? No, you don't deserve calling that name," Farina said while glaring at them. "It shouldn't have been like that. You destroyed it. You failed us." She would soon end up dying here, but somehow, Farina was satisfied with this ending. In that split second, she had finally become the type of person she wanted to be. However, death did not come. A few gunshots cracked through the air over the clatter of swords. Farina turned around and saw the men in black who had been guarding the yard suddenly appear in the magic movie. Their situation immediately changed. The enemies seemed to be frightened by those reinforcements. They got on their horses and soon disappeared in the mountain range, leaving the bodies of their fellow companions behind. "Thank you," said the wounded guardian and the witch as they limped to Farina. "I thought my father has completely controlled the church, but I didn't expect that there were still loyal warriors like you. I thought there was no hope, but God hasn't abandoned us, the witch said while raising her tear-glazed face and smiled at Farina. You not only saved us but also the entire human race. Farina opened her mouth but did not know what to say. We're going to Grey Castle next and tell their king about the coup that occurred on the Hermes Plateau. We hope it's not too late, the Guardian said solemnly. Run. Never come back to the Holy City again. We'll meet again once the church's mistake is rectified. Take care, my friend. Light gradually faded out as the couple disappeared from her view. When the light was on again, Farina found herself still sitting in the hall on her chair. Even her wounds as a result of the battle had disappeared. Was she really hallucinating? Good Lord, this is amazing. The hall exploded into a tidal wave of applause as the audience came back to the present. Good heavens! I feel I'm changing the history. What a brilliant masterpiece. I would be willing to pay 100 gold royals to watch it one more time, let alone 50. You scared the hell out of me when you rushed to the front, Joe said while patting his chest. It's so amazing to conceive such a story and make it so lifelike. Farina did not answer, but she noticed the men in black looked around nervously with guns in their hands, as though something out of their expectation had happened. 2 other theater staff members dashed to the backstage, looking equally flustered. This did not look like a great success at all. Farina held her breath, trying to figure out what was going on based on the few signs she had discovered. Suddenly, she heard distant explosions and people cry and execrate, but these voices were overpowered by the heated discussion in the hall. This did not look right. Farina realized that something was wrong here. She rose to her feet abruptly. Under the surprised gaze of Joe, Farina passed the audience at the back and ran out of the room. Stop! You, hold on, the men in black yelled, attempting to stop her, but it was too late. Farina ran across the yard and reached the street outside. Neverwinter was in a state of chaos. Many people were running and shouting. Several residential areas had caught a fire. She heard more explosions in the industrial zone, and the whole city seemed to be out of control. What scared her most was something above. Darkness pressed in, and the sun had vanished into the thin air. A huge crimson moon appeared in the sky like a giant eye that snapped open. Chapter 12:16, A Chain Reaction. Not only Neverwinter citizens saw the bloody moon. Margaret was standing at the bow of the Snow Wind early this morning while gazing at the distant ocean. It had been 66 days since they had crossed the sea line. Ocean waves rushed toward them, high at one time and low at another. Their movements were almost the same as the waves at the shallow waters thousands of miles away, as if the two types of waves shared the same origin. If the swirling sea did have a source, it must be the greatest discovery in the history of time. Margaret was confident that the ocean waves would lead her to her final destination, and she also put great faith in the Snow Wind. The Snow Wind did not require a sail to proceed against gusts of wind and rushes of rain. Since the ship was colossal, they could put plenty of food and water on it. Thanks to this robust and sturdy iron ship, not a single ship fell behind in this expedition. She believed that Thunder would definitely make some spectacular discovery during this journey. Any luck? A familiar voice said to her from behind. Margaret turned around and said smilingly, If I did find something, I would have informed the lookouts perched on the mast. So, you should have asked them first. The person who was speaking to her was none other than the captain of the fleet, Thunder. I don't think so, he said brightly. Perhaps they've found something already but are too shocked to say anything. Margaret stifled her laughter. She knew Thunder was referring to what had happened when they had crossed the sea line. When the horizon became vertical, even the most experienced sailor had failed to react promptly. Everyone had fallen off the watchtower as the world had turned upside down, their legs too shaky to support them. Seasoned sailors would normally cling to cables and masts in the event of a storm to prevent themselves from falling off the ship. However, the sea line rendered all the common senses they had useless. Thunder said while shrugging, According to my intelligence, the chambers of commerce would later change their lookouts. They'll have the boldest person on their ship to serve as a lookout. Shame on them. Really? Margaret said while shaking her head. But I believe after the experience at the sea line, nothing could really perturb them anymore. Who knows? Thunder said while patting Margaret on the shoulder. His voice suddenly lowered. Don't worry. Joan will be fine. Margaret's smile faltered. She nodded resolutely and said, yes, she was born to live in the ocean. I'm sure we'll meet her again somewhere soon. Being optimistic was an important ability for explorers. Margaret knew worrying would not help with anything. What she should do was to pull herself together and move on. By the way, the meeting is about to start, Thunder said after a moment of silence. The other captains are already there. Come to the cabin with me. Okay, got it. All the captains gathered to discuss the route, the status of their ships, and resources. They held this meeting every 3 or 4 days to make sure the whole fleet was on the right track. Just at that time, Thunder and Margaret noticed that the seawater was suddenly awash with a sheet of a strange red color. The sailors on the deck were all frozen to the spot, gaping at the far distance as if seeing something incredible. A little farther on, several people fell off the mast and to the deck, as though they had seen the sea line again. It really surprised Margaret. Weren't they the boldest people on the ship? Margaret turned around slowly, and the next moment, all her blood froze. A gigantic, crimson round celestial object hung low over the horizon, far larger than the sun. It just came out of nowhere. In the name of Three God, Margaret mumbled. Is this what His Majesty called the bloody moon? But Thunder did not speak. It was such a terrifying scene that even Thunder failed to formulate a proper answer. A long whistle pierced the air. It was the snow wind. The shriek of the ship shattered the dead silence and jerked everyone out of the trance. The whistle indicated there were enemies. Margaret and Thunder exchanged dark looks and ran toward the bridge. What happened? Thunder yelled as he darted into the command room. There are ships, his first mate stammered, coming from the southeast, toward US. What? Thunder said. He quickly snatched the telescope from the first mate and looked in the direction the latter had pointed out. Margaret's heart sank to the bottom. They were now thousands of miles away from the shadow waters. They hardly saw any birds around this area, let alone ships. This was a new sea never intruded by human beings. She thus got a pair of telescope from another sailor and looked in the same direction. Jesus! Margaret gasped. 2 shadows were floating on the surface of the water. They had no sail but were proceeding against the water. What was more horrific was that the seawater around them was boiling, as though numerous fishes were coming with them. However, Margaret soon noticed that what seemed to be fishes were actually the last thing explorers wanted to see. They were sea ghosts. Their fins slid in and out of their views. Sometimes, they leaped out of the water, throwing a splatter of water that reflected off the sinister red sheen of the bloody moon, which reminded Margaret of a pack of sharks vying for food. On my order, all the ships turn about. Thunder yelled. Full sail. Advance in full sail. Everyone, ready for the war. Yes, sir. We've got trouble. The captain of the tuna swallowed hard. May the god of ocean bless us, the other captains all prayed. Fjord's people knew that no ship could outstrip a sea ghost, which meant their enemies would soon catch up with them. Their situation worsened every minute. As the 2 shadows got closer, Margaret saw what they looked like. They were half in the shape of a ship and half a skeleton of a monster, something that would have only appeared in one's nightmare. Their ribs exhaled clouds of dark green objects, and they were now only a dozen miles away from them. When the dark green object fell into the water, the ocean stirred. Apparently, nobody wanted to be hit by such an ominous thing. Thunder remained unflappable and issued another order. Abandon all the food and supplies. Keep half of the drinking water only. No, just keep 30% of them and accelerate. Astonished, Margaret said, then we won't be able to explore. And it's probably not going to be enough for us to return to Neverwinter. The first mate said hesitantly. We could fish and collect rain. Thunder took a sharp intake of breath and said, however, if we could not outrun those sea ghosts and monsters, we'll all end up dying here. The exploration is over. Now, our goal is to survive. Chapter 12-17, Doomsday, Part 1. In the snow reflection castle in the kingdom of Everwinter. Your lordship, the army of Grey Castle retreated. When a guard rushed into the castle hall and reported the news, all the nobles rested their eyes on him. Are you sure? Earl Marwain asked as he stood bolt upright. I'm positive. More than one scout has confirmed that, guard said while nodding vigorously. Some people saw them empty their campsite overnight and also abandon a lot of food. They're finally gone, exclaimed the Earl, who burst into a roar of laughter. His heart instantly lightened. A month ago, Grey Castle men had suddenly appeared in the kingdom of Everwinter and soon taken over many port cities. They accepted neither their surrender nor presents but started to evacuate the cities immediately. Their barbarous behavior was even more outrageous than the church's. At least, the church would provide them with an opportunity to negotiate. The reason provided by the Grey Castle men was also quite ludicrous. They claimed that the bloody moon would bring swift destruction to the kingdom. Therefore, everyone must leave as soon as possible. This was the land passed down by generations, and the Earl would not allow anyone to take it away from him. Neither the church nor Grey Castle could do that. Your lordship, a withered, ancient scholar said oily, the so-called full moon, sickle moon, dark moon and bloody moon are simply astronomical phenomena. They appear every now and then. If they believe that it omens ill, then let them do so. As long as your lordship holds on to this land, they can't do anything about it. That's right, the treacherous precipices around the snow reflection castle will protect you from any invasion. We won't yield even if the Grey Castle men are willing to negotiate. The church threatened you first as well, but in the end, they had no choice but to promote you to bishop. His other henchmen all rejoined. Earl Marwain became more and more confident. As he gazed at the sinister bloody moon that had emerged 3 days ago through the window, his fear gradually dissolved into gratitude. Had the bloody moon not appeared just in time, the Grey Castle men would have continued to advance, and he would have definitely lost his precious snow reflection castle. Although the Earl had heard that those barbarians rarely attack or interfere with a city ruled by a noble, taking away his people was intolerable. If all the surrounding cities were evacuated, who could he rely on during the months of demons? Like his henchmen had said, this city was his asset. It was to the north of the king's city, situated among precipices. The gaps between the city and the precipices were around a few miles to hundreds of meters wide, connected by suspension bridges. These gaps were actually wide enough to house a few castles. His ancestors picked this isolated land to build their castle because this area was well fortified. In fact, the snow reflection castle had never fallen. Even though the Church of Hermes had conquered the entire kingdom of Everwinter in a very short period of time, they had never managed to drive their army into the snow reflection castle. Instead, they had sent ambassadors to negotiate with the Lord and promised him that he could continue to rule this land as long as he pledged fealty to the church. This was what a normal person would do. That was why the Earl maintained his silence for such a long time, hoping to sell the city at the best price. However, he could not accept Wimbledon's conditions. Earl Marwain did not think that the demons referred to by the Grey Castle men would invade his castle. The towering cliffs were natural defense. However, he needed surrounding towns and cities to provide him with resources. Without people, his current stockpile would be exhausted eventually. Fortunately, these Grey Castle men all fled when they saw the bloody moon. Mr. Zack, what should I do next? Marwain asked the old scholar. Of course we should launch an attack at them, Zack replied while stroking his long beard. The Earl stiffened. Attacking was a completely different story. He would have never defied the King of Grey Castle had he not had this geographical advantage. Rest assured. I'm not asking you to attack the Grey Castle men directly. However, you could seize the territories they looted. Look, the scouts said the Grey Castle soldiers are scattered around. Each unit only contains around 100 soldiers. How many resources and supplies could they take away with so few of them? Marwain's eyes glistened with excitement. He said, "You mean?" The scholar nodded smilingly and said, "Those people who left with the Grey Castle soldiers must have left a lot of their possessions behind. If we traced them down, we could probably retrieve some resources. For example, food that was not easy to carry along." Marwain thus summoned his chief knight in excitement. While he was about to issue an order, a guard suddenly burst in and yelled, Your lordship, there's a demon outside the castle." "What demon?" the earl asked while scoffing at him. "You believe the nonsense those Grey Castle men said?" Pray forgive me, your lordship, but it..." The guard stammered in a hollow sort of voice. "But it isn't human indeed." "Not human?" Everyone looked one another in bewilderment. Marwain's heart leaped to his throat. However, as the lord of the Snow Reflection Castle, he must maintain his composure. The earl thus put up a straight face and said, "Well, take me there. Let's see what it actually is. I'm very curious about what the creatures living in hell look like." With that being said, Marwain still put on his best armor and took the largest god stone of retaliation with him before he ascended the city wall. A dozen guards erected a wall of shields in front of him. He felt hugely relieved when he saw the demon. The demon was, as his guard had suggested, alone. It was standing on a protruding rock instead of the city wall. The rock was a little taller than the wall, right in front of which was the fathomless abyss. The patrolling knights had already ordered their squires to set up catapults and were ready to shoot their arrows. After studying the demon for a while, Marwain noticed that it was indeed not remotely human. The demon had hands and feet, but it had a much larger build than an ordinary man, its skin blue, with protruding veins running underneath. The biggest difference lay in the tentacles that sprouted from its cheeks, chin, and elbows. Marwain was disgusted about those wriggling tentacles. To his surprise, the demon's eyes were shut as if it was sleeping. Marwain did not feel it threatening at all. Marwain wondered if the demon's visit was really the result of the bloody moon, but he soon convinced himself that this was a pretext the Grey Castle men used to persuade ignorant villagers to leave the country. This monster definitely had nothing to do with the rumored Doomsday. He just needed to ask his soldiers to shoot arrows, and then the demon would be dead. At this thought, Marwain took a deep breath and yelled, "Listen, you filthy, revolting monster. I'm the lord of the Snow Reflection Castle, Marwain Casso. You illegally entered my territory. If you want to live, on your knees and surrender. This is your only choice. Otherwise, the icy abyss beneath will be the place you find your perpetual peace." Marwain did not think the demon understood him. His hot statement was more like a demonstration of his own bravery than a warning to the demon. If he scared away this demon that the Grey Castle men were afraid of, then he would definitely rise to fame. "My patience is limited. I'll count to 5, 5, 4. In the meantime, Marwain motioned his soldiers to get ready to shoot. 3. The demon's eyes snapped open. It bellowed, "Enough!" Its voice pierced the air like thunders and rang off the precipes. Numerous icicles fell off as the cliffs shook. Marwain felt the ground was about to shatter. There was a ringing silence, and he took a few steps backward in terror and fell to the ground. Chapter 12:18, Doomsday, Part 2. This monster could speak human language. The earl was led into temples when the guard helped him up. He had intended to exhibit his authority and valor in front of the demon to impress the other nobles. He had not expected, however, that the demon would uncover his carefully disguised gallantry with just one single word. What was more mortifying was that the demon was alone. "Damn it! I must kill this monster." Marwain raised his hand while gritting his teeth. He was about to order the soldiers to shoot when the old scholar suddenly stopped him and blinked. His lips took shape of a silent stay put. It took the earl a few seconds to realize that he should not lose his composure at the moment. Since the demon could talk, there was a possibility of negotiation and communication. Considering the situation was uncertain at this point, it was unwise to resort to force. The Earl realized that the rumors circulated by the Grey Castle men did cloud his judgment, for he had also, for a split second, viewed the demon as his enemy. Perhaps, the demon came here alone as an ambassador. Why did he take no action in the first place but stood upon the city wall while doing nothing? If the demon was ferocious like what Grey Castle men had said, it should have raided the surrounding villages unprotected by the city wall a long time ago. The more Marwain contemplated the matter, the more convinced he was. Had he killed the ambassador, he would have bred enmity with the demon, which was exactly what the Grey Castle men wanted. However, the Earl found it hard to change his hostile attitude so quickly and sit down to talk in an amicable manner, for just a moment ago, he had commanded the demon to kneel down. Fortunately, the old scholar understood the Earl's dilemma. He stepped forward and said, "Impertinent. If you can speak our language, why didn't you tell us the purpose of your trip? Our Lord kindly gives you another chance to speak. What's your intention of coming here?" Marwain praised the old scholar internally. He had paid 10 gold royals for the service of this former butler at the king's city. "Before I answer you, I have a question for you," the demon said placidly. "What's your relationship with the human beings on the Feral Plains?" "The Feral Plains? Where was it?" They exchanged confused looks, utterly bemused. But Marwain was now very sure that this monster was an ambassador. "I don't know where the Feral Plains is," the old scholar replied again. "One place may have different names in different parts of the kingdom. We are of different races, and we may have very different ways to call a city. Bring a map, and I may tell you where it is." "No, you humans came up with this name, and I'm just borrowing it." The demon then shook his head and said, "I see. I can't believe you're still like hundreds of years ago where each lord circled out their own territories without knowing anything about this world. I was expecting to see you yield to your fate in disbelief, terror and despair, but it seems that I was wrong. What did it mean? What monstrous absurdity it was talking about?" The Earl frowned. For a moment, he seemed to capture a faint hint of disappointment in its horrific countenance. "Are you referring to the Grey Castle men?" the chief knight suddenly asked. "Yes," the demon said while looking toward him. "They've been saying that demons will creep out of hell when the bloody moon appears." "They're gone now," the knight said contemptuously. "If you go after them now, you may be able to catch a glimpse of them at the port in the east." "Really?" the demon said as it gazed upon the east, and then turned around again. "I'll go, but not now. Since you know nothing about the Feral Plains, then I'll cut the crap. I'm the Sky Lord, the commander of the Western Front Army. Thousands of years ago, your race and my race made an agreement to fight against the witches and their underlings. Your ancestors agreed to serve us. I granted them land, power and wealth. This contract has yet been terminated. It won't terminate until the war ends. You, as the descendants of your ancestors, should continue to serve us," the demon proclaimed in a booming voice. "Now, I command you to offer this city in accordance with the terms set out in this contract and serve me." Earl Marwain gaped. This demon was crazy. Who cared about a contract signed 1,000 years ago? He would not even take a contract after a lapse of 2 years seriously. What kind of stupid commander of the Western Front Army was? What kind of commander would come in person alone? This monster was out of its mind. "What if I disagree?" the Earl said defiantly. His patience was exhausted. "Death will let you yield," the demon who called himself the Sky Lord said. "Look, this is your fate." The Earl looked up and saw the distant mountains had been enveloped by a thin mist. It was not the mist he normally saw in the impassable mountain range, but a horrendous, crimson one. The Earl was not sure if it was because of the bloody moon or it was the color of the mist itself. Another peculiar phenomenon he noticed was that the red mist did not float in the air but slowly flowed down the mountains, forming a hazy waterfall. Was the demon waiting for this moment? Marwain felt a jolt of uneasiness at the pit of his stomach. He cast a glance at his equally disturbed knights and squires and knew he must take action now. "With you alone," the Earl said through clenched teeth and gestured his soldiers. "I've given you a chance. Kill it." The knights and guards finally pulled themselves together. They immediately released the arrows, which whistled in the air and streaked toward the demon. However, not a single arrow hit it. Everyone goggled incredulously. The demon dived into a black hole and vanished from their sight. "Damn it. It has magic power," the chief knight said in a low voice. "Then how's it different from the witches?" "No worries. We're all wearing a god's stone of retaliation. Magic power won't hurt us." Marwain yelled as he clutched the pendant in front of his chest. "Find and kill it." "The demon is there," a guard shouted. Within a second, the demon had flown over the abyss and landed silently on the street behind the city wall. The Earl was alarmed when he saw that the demon could instantly pass the precepts. Now, he was more certain that this dangerous monster, whether it was an ambassador or not, must be exterminated. After all, it was alone. Shoot the godstone arrows. Treat it as a witch. 100 gold royals for anyone who could kill it. As all the knights and guards charged at the demon slowly raised its arms. The next moment, a black screen around hundreds of meters wide appeared abruptly behind the demon and blocked the street and houses like a wall. What was it playing at? Was it planning to hide? However, the Earl soon found the answer. Thick red mist suddenly flooded all over the black screen. Then a group of monsters he had never beheld rushed out of the screen and clashed with the knights who dashed forward. The god's stone did not help at all. The knights were thrown into the air by the howling monsters before they landed heavily a few meters away. The knights coughed out blood, their chests sinking. Apparently, there was no chance for them to survive. Nevertheless, this was just the beginning of the nightmare. More monsters came out of the black screen, bowed to the Sky Lord, and joined the battle. Every monster was far stronger and larger than an ordinary man. Soon, they gained the top of the city of Wall and began to slaughter the soldiers. The soldiers were torn into pieces, their blood and broken limbs flying in all directions. Within 7 or 8 minutes, the city had been filled with painful groans. Many people were heading to the city gate, in an attempt to escape, but they were stopped by the icy abyss. Marwain felt his legs give way. He staggered and fell to the ground. This time, nobody came to help him up. His guard had been ripped apart by the demons. His precious snow reflection castle, the land passed down by generations that he took pride in, fell. The air was heavy with pungent red mist, and this city had completely become a living hell. Through the mist, the bloody moon appeared to be even more gruesome. The Earl now understood what a Doomsday looked like. The end of Volume 2, The Battle of Doomsday.